I talked about supernova last week, and that kind of spurred a conversation about sustainable energies and how to create this stuff. And I talked about element A, which is what I refer to as a highly charged substance. And so it came to my attention kind of what you guys are working on. And if you want to sustain this, create it in a way, and you need more pressure and heat energy to keep it like that, we'll just build, like I saw the kind of like the dome thing you were working on, sphere thing. Just put a sphere in a sphere, and maybe another sphere even, and then fill that with proper fluids, and then you create extra pressure by doing that. When I think about sustainable energy, I think about so many different ways and areas and elements to use and the different processes of it, that there's so much going through my head, and what I'm really explaining here is essentially how the Earth's core works. And so as you go down, like you create that element A in a lower sphere, and so you got all the pressures and stuff holding that in there. And then what you need is it's gonna have to breathe. And there's a couple of different ways to do that in this approach. This is kind of more of an advanced nuclear physics, an atomic generator of sorts. So you got to have it breathing. And the way, for example, you could argue a galaxy works like this, or, just any kind of system, celestial body like this, a singularity. You have your two main poles, and they work in this it's kind of a weird way to explain it. It's a little bit difficult. So ultimately that core is pulling mass towards it because it's got so much energy. And in a galaxy, those energized particles are actually, like, the particles that are in there are so energized that's kind of it's out. But as well, when that energy is going out, creates a vacuum of sorts sucking in, so all the hydrogen and other mass would actually go in. It's kind of a dual effect. And then once it gets further out, the repelling forces exceed the attractive forces, which is what creates the actual jet. So you might want to consider doing something like that when we talk about the sustainable energy project here, this particular one. So that's, one way. I picture using all kinds of different elements. I picture, one area of conversation for the subject is the three ways to actually cycle energy off of, or anyway, and this is just common knowledge, right? The three main ways are going to be electromagnetism and heat and pressure. And so you can utilize all of those, or even just the heat and pressure, whichever, and there's different ways to do both. If we're talking about using electromagnets, I even think about, using the actual seal and making it out of a certain type of metal that would kind of be reflective, or, the energy has to go through it anyway. But it essentially hits that, the way energy works, it hits that, and then it causes it vibrate, reflection, refraction. And you can play with those waves quite a bit. I picture things taking two of these, put them together. I picture having the core as that substance, maybe even in some models putting charged uranium, close to it. But all that pressure should really kind of make it easier. So anyway, you can do that. And that's just really what I'm trying to explain there, is just creating two of these, or using multiple pieces and putting them into proximity. And it's the study of the wave function, energy wave function. So that's, one part. And I picture the domes, even you could have them, part of them, or the whole thing, itself rotating in opposite directions or whatever. I picture even, there's a model where I picture using a diamond core, and that diamond kind of directs the energy currents. There's so many different ways and approaches. I picture one where you know how I'm talking about valves and using pressure valves. I've talked about that same actual idea in sealing up all the the leaks from oil wells. You know, if you pressurize like an oil well vent, and then you could put our biomass just in that, and over time, then you know when the pressure builds up underneath in the seal that you create in there, you can actually use that energy to refine the biomass that you've put in there as part of the seal as well. And so you'd use that same kind of an example in this setup that I'm referring to. So the ways to siphon off, I was going to say, to siphon off the energy is through electromagnetism, heat, and pressure. You could put like, I also picture having like, you know, the mass itself is going to be it's going to be repelling from itself. Energy repels. So, you know, you have your extremely dense core, and then maybe in like the first layer of that, you have that mass, you know, cycling around, you know, the upper one going one way and the bottom one going the other way, repelling from itself, creating static energy all along the way. And then you could just build a Faraday cage around it and make that conductive and conduct your electricity out through that. Or you can build, you know, like spinning electromagnets around it, and even have the electromagnets going the opposite way or the same way or what have you. And as long as they're like basically working like an alternator, as long as it's spinning around a path, you know, click, you know, creating a spark, energy is produced every time it spins around. There's so many different ways, you know, using the high pressure, the high pressure out and the heat to spin a turbine. You know, you're going to get a lot of radioactive material out of this. I picture ways of actually trying to fuse that radioactive waste with other elements, like even like say if you got the right mixture right between that and potash and something else, you could create like an abundant source of lithium batteries, for example. You could use like just biomass, bio waste or feces, you know, separate the hydrogen from the phosphorus, and you know, you got fertilizer, and then you got hydrogen, or you know, maybe if you just get good water out of it somehow through that'd be awesome. Imagine if, you know, I picture like having this sustainable energy plant coinciding with a recycling plant, and have the two like merge together, and you know that recycling plant is actually taking all the waste from humanity and putting it into this, creating energy and usable stuff for us. There's so much that we can do on this subject, and there's so much else, so many different ways that we can actually make this project work. And you know, if one plant doesn't work, throw it out and let's try again. And I could talk about sustainable energy basically like all day, like even just using magnets. I mean, you know, like using that process. But that'd be super awesome, yeah. And you know, if we could create like an atomic reactor, like what I'm talking about here, and just using our bio waste would be the ultimate best. But yeah. Oh, and I just want to make a really important note. You definitely don't want to rupture the seals of both your exhaust manifold and the structure itself. You don't want to have some rogue person in there somehow survive the radiation and the toxic waste and stuff, and take a drill and drill a hole in there. You know, maybe even infuse water that would be reactive. That is process that I'm explaining right now is what we call fracking. It's extremely bad. That layer of shale is one of the layers I'm speaking about in this model. And if you were to say drill down into the shale and then blow it up and then releases a bunch of, you know, gas and contaminated water supplies, that highly energized substance would theoretically like mix with other substances and cause earthquakes or big booms or something. So if you're in the States and you're wondering what the big booms are, I would check out if there's fracking going on. I think that beyond any reasonable doubt that fracking is the worst thing that we can do to our planet, and it should be halted immediately. We shouldn't let that one go to the back burner. It should be brought up in election campaigns and everything else. Fracking is the worst thing to do. You know, and then again, when we talk about, you know, just taking out the oil is that next layer of mass that's, you know, helping keep all the pressure down there. And so these functions, these mechanical functions, are extremely important to both this creating a sustainable energy project such as this, as well as saving the planet as we know it. Okay, guys, take care.